Hello, welcome to Business Daily from the BBC. I'm Manuela Zaragoza. Coming up, the Indian companies not hiring women because they fear sexual harassment claims.
We don't engage any girls. Once an allegation is made, if this kind of a hassle and police would drop in every second day, carry out inquiries, it doesn't help really.
Could that explain the decline in the number of India's working women, plus office life after the global Me Too movement?
Although we still hear distressing stories of abuse from many parts of the world, I do think that both men and women have a much greater awareness of what is acceptable behaviour, both in the workplace and out of it.
That's all here in Business Daily from the BBC. In many countries around the world, the Me Too movement and the push for equality has led hundreds of companies, including the BBC, to reform their pay and employment policies in an attempt to level the playing field between men and women. But in India, your gender may actually stop you from getting a job altogether. Some companies there are choosing not to hire any women. Could that go some way to explain why female participation in the workforce in India has been declining in recent years? Only 24% of women are working in the formal economy there, well below the global average of 47%, according to UN Women. Raul Tandon has this report from Kolkata.
We want justice! We want justice!
I'm at a protest in central Kolkata. There are about 200 women here. They're demonstrating against sexual violence and sexual harassment that they say is all too common across this country. Many are wearing t-shirts saying, "I'm ashamed to be Indian." Women here say they face harassment at work. Amongst the protesters is banker Chunki Sharma.
Even, I don't feel safe. And in the office space, how women can feel safer? To have a very, very strong laws, rules in the office against sexual harassment. Some corporates are doing that, in smaller businesses, probably in smaller companies, I'm not sure. This has to be there in a very, very strong manner.
It's important that policies are in place in businesses to say, look, this is unacceptable, and if you do it, you're going to be thrown out.
Yes.
Because often it is acceptable, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we all become thick-skinned along the way, and we think this is normal after some time, and we just get used to abnormal things, and that's how I think it spreads, and people, their tolerance levels go up, because we all know women who never spoke.
But as you can hear, more women are now raising their voices. They're no longer prepared to tolerate the harassment. More and more are now speaking out. Businesswoman Rajeshwari Datta says India is developing its own Me Too movement. She wants more women to stand up.
The mindset has not changed. Women have come forward in this country, but men are still living in the past. And that's for most men. And mind you, education has nothing to do with it. They're all educated, they're all MBAs. But when you hear them talking, it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgraceful. And they are, from very good schools and MBAs. It's very hard for them to accept women in a senior position, in a successful position.
Hello, Datta Ghosh and Associate.
I've left the protest and have come to a successful accountancy firm in Kolkata. Most of the people working here are men. One of the problems here in India is that as more women complain about harassment at work, some companies are just deciding not to employ them. Deepak Datta runs this one.
I'm very wary of taking them. We don't engage any girls. You never know, with so many young people that are working, once an allegation is made and law comes into act in this office, we have had it. As it is, we struggle to find jobs, do jobs. But then if this kind of a hassle and police would drop in every second day, carry out inquiries, it doesn't help really.
People in Kolkata love to have adda or a chat over a cup of tea. I've come to one of the city's new fashionable cafes. Over the last 10 years, the number of women employed in India has declined from 36% to 24%. There are a number of reasons for that, but it does appear that some companies just don't want to take on women workers. With me here is Vidul Proti, a successful businessman in this city.
Just see it happening continuously and probably will continue for a while. HR policies need to be stringent, more checks and balances need to be in place, mindsets need to change.
Until that happens, do you feel that companies just think it's too risky sometimes to employ women because you may have harassment cases?
I guess that is what is happening. I think small, medium-sized companies, maybe even big ones, feel that not only will it lead to bad mouthing, but also maybe penal obligations and penalties. So I think that's a major area of concern. They personally feel that if we don't employ women, these things won't happen.
Back in the centre of Kolkata, the protest is finished, but many of the women are still here chatting about the problems that they face. So when are things going to improve in the workplace? Women's activist Supriyo Chowdhury believes here in India, it's going to take some time.
Ultimately, it is a question of politics and economics. The fear of political privilege and of economic power being taken away, being possibly threatened by educated women who are claiming more in the workplace. This is what I think men are worried about.
India wants to become an economic superpower, but if it continues to exclude millions of women from the workplace, that will take longer to achieve.
Raul Tandon reporting there in Calcutta. And given the comments we heard from company executives in his report, it's perhaps no surprise that India was rated the worst country in the G20 to be a woman. That's according to an international poll of gender experts conducted by the Thomson Reuters Foundation several years ago. Countries were ranked according to rates of domestic violence, female infanticide, acid attacks and economic discrimination. Deepa Narayanan is a sociologist based in Delhi. She and her researchers conducted 600 interviews, that's about 3,000 hours over 3 years, to find out what was behind the often overt sexism displayed in not just corporate India, but also in many other parts of society there too. Deepa documented the results in a book called Chup, the Hindi word for the imperative quiet. I started by asking her whether she was surprised to hear that some Indian companies are refusing to hire women altogether.
I am surprised. I've heard a lot of brazen things, but that's pretty direct. I've heard a lot about sexual harassment at the workplace. When I interviewed 600 women for my book called Chup, which is about breaking the silence about India's women, I think about 25-30% of the women said that they had experienced sexual harassment, including by people in the human resources department.
So in the workplace.
In the workplace, absolutely. And what's also quite openly said, and even in interviews, that men are reluctant to hire women because they're going to have babies or they're going to get married. And there's absolutely no apology in asking women very personal questions about their future plans.
I suppose from a Western point of view, and perhaps from many other places in the world listening to this, the shocking thing is that it's so brazen, but also an effective admission by certain corporate directors and companies that women are not safe in their workplace, and that rather than deal with that issue, the safety of women in the workplace, they just choose to back off it altogether and not hire them.
Right, but then it's just putting the blame and the burden even of safety back on women.
Where does this all come from? Where does this overt brazen sexism actually originate?
I think that's the million-dollar question. I think what's really important is to understand that. And to understand that is to understand the power of culture and how culture bends or completely distorts economic effects and economic theorizing and economic incentives, which is why you see that as men's incomes go up, women stop working because men are the ones who carry the honor and control and the power, and women are not supposed to exist except to serve the men. And we thought that with education and employment and with modernity, especially in the big cities, this would shift. It hasn't. It just becomes more subtle. So in effect, what we find is that both men and women are living in the 19th century social norms rather than the 21st century.
And this cuts across all classes, does it, from the research you did?
It cuts across classes. In fact, I was so shocked by what I found, I decided to focus just on the big cities, including Delhi, because I was so shocked about what I was finding among the middle and the upper classes who are educated, talented, smart, and employed.
What you're painting here is a very, very bleak picture in terms of employment prospects for women in India. Are there any shining lights, any pockets of light?
Absolutely. I think you'll see in the newspapers every day of women breaking records and entering every field, from being fighter pilots to policemen. But the collective system that keeps women down and discounts them has not shifted, which is why you see that even with employment, violence against women, sexual harassment, it's almost routine. The sexual harassment, the lack of safety of women is very stark in India. It's very in your face. It's not very different in many ways from the West, where sexual harassment has led to the Me Too movement on large scales, whether it's in Sweden or the US.
Sure, but in many other countries they would say, well, there is legal recourse, whereas it sounds to me that in India that isn't often available.
No, there's legal recourse in India. It's just the implementation isn't there. The consciousness isn't there. Every organization, every office is supposed to have anti-sexual harassment committee, but it often doesn't exist. If it does exist, it's a huge act of courage to report a sexual harassment case because the prospect of justice is bleak till very recently.
And is there any sign that things may change, or have you got any sort of, are you optimistic, or do you think it's going to stay that way, that this culture, this mindset is unlikely to change anytime soon?
I think in India, the changes in laws have not led to changes in behavior. And that's because we just have not accepted the power of culture and how important it is to have a national conversation on what it means today to be a woman or a good woman and what it means to be a man. What is the meaning of masculinity that goes beyond total control and power over girls and women? We are not going to see a change despite any laws that we put on the books, because we just don't have the capacity to implement these laws.
I was speaking there to Deepa Narayanan in Delhi. Change is brewing in the rest of the world, though, in no small part due to the Me Too movement. So says Professor Heather McGregor, Executive Dean of the Edinburgh Business School. And she should know she was a co-founder of the 30% Club in the UK, which campaigns to increase the number of women on executive boards. Over to her.
This might sound strange, but I have been thinking about the month of October. Why? Because lots of historical milestones happened in October, one year or another. October 1987 saw what is still the biggest fall ever in one day on the US stock market. And October 1990 saw the reunification of Germany after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Going back a bit further, I almost hesitate to mention that October 1971 was the month that the UK government voted to join, rather than to leave, Europe. And I have also been thinking about October 2017. Why is that a memorable month? Because that was the month that the hashtag #MeToo was used for the very first time. I think that this will eventually be shown to be an utterly transformational event. For the first time, women everywhere, including some very famous ones, felt able to speak up about their treatment at the hands of men who had abused their position in greater and lesser ways. In doing this, they did a great service to other women who had suffered the same fate, showing that they were not alone. There are those who think that hashtag #MeToo is simply political correctness gone mad. They think that this will lead to fewer women being hired because of concerns about their treatment, and that women are doing themselves no favours by calling out inappropriate behaviour. I have met many of those people over the course of my 30-year career. Like the man who asked me at a job interview what my husband did and how much money he earned. And then when I looked rather startled at this, suggested that I was only applying for the role as a hobby. And then the man I worked for a few years after that, who, on learning that I had an MBA, told me that he too was an MBA. Married, but available. Yes, I am afraid that it is #MeToo. If that happened now, would I report him? No, I don't believe that I would. I don't think that #MeToo has made the world a place where women are more likely to speak up to name the culprits to others. As every business school student learns, people are motivated to focus on fulfilling their basic needs, which usually are being met through having a job that allows you to put food on the table and a roof over your head. If you think your job might be affected if you report someone, then you are still, even after several months of #MeToo, very unlikely to report them. Despite that, has #MeToo made the world a safer place? I think so. Although we still hear distressing stories of abuse from many parts of the world, I do think that both men and women have a much greater awareness of what is acceptable behaviour, both in the workplace and out of it. This will definitely lead, and it probably has already, to fewer men trying it on and more women having the confidence to push back when they do. Even if those women don't feel, in many cases, that they can report the perpetrator. And that is a permanent change. And when they come to write their history books, they will date it back to October 2017. This is Professor Heather McGregor of Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh for the BBC World Service.
And Heather brings us to the end of this edition of Business Daily. Head to bbcnews.com for more business news and do get in touch. The Twitter handle is @ManuelaBBC or @BBC World Biz. We're back again at the same time tomorrow.